So the question is hardware production becoming more and more obsolete? And the simple answer to that is no. It's actually becoming more popular than ever. Let's talk about it.
Bolo!
So what made it seem like this was becoming obsolete, using all of this gear? The first thing was the rise in software dominance, okay? There was a whole bunch of people who pretty much left these type of setups and went straight into the box with their laptop and a MIDI keyboard. And why would somebody do that knowing that these things actually sound really good? Well, number one, it was speed. You can make a beat inside of the box, do your editing, do everything in there, and you were pretty much done. And just press bounce. And then from there, a lot of times all you have to do is just email the beat to somebody, or, well, now you can go ahead and just send it to somebody's phone, but back then you had to email it. But it was much faster to do it, okay? It was way faster to do it that way. And then you just had that instant gratification of just completing a whole track and having it done, and you don't have to do anything else. Now, the number two thing about it was much cheaper. It was much cheaper to just buy a laptop, buy a MIDI controller, maybe buy like an interface, a cheap interface, and then just get a whole bunch of programs. At that time in the early 2000s, 2010s, maybe to like 2012, Nexus was real big, Purity was real big, Omnisphere. And then, a lot of that stuff was much cheaper than to go out and buying 5 or 6 keyboards and then make sure you guys get an MP or some type of groove box or something to basically sequence on. So, of course, it was way more affordable at that time, and it just made more sense, even though, you didn't really have that sound, in a sense. And then the last thing was, it was kind of trendy. You know what I'm saying? There was a lot of artists that were, and a lot of name brand producers at that time that were producing in the box for that simple reason, because it was cheaper and it was easier to complete a beat on. Okay, so you had a lot of people that were making this thing like a real trend of like, hey man, even though this stuff is cool, doing it inside of the box is much better. Even my mentor, I used to make beats on the MPC, but the first day I came into his studio, he was like, yo, you still making beats on the MP? I'm like, yeah. He's like, nah, we're not doing that. We're making everything on Logic over here. So if you want to work over here, you got to know Logic. We got to make these beats on Logic. It just makes more sense to do it that way than to be lugging around all of that equipment and all that stuff like that. And that's another thing. I forgot to mention that. All of the equipment, you had to get cords, cables, you had to run it into stuff. And it was a lot. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna lie to you. So a lot of times, even back then, it was way more convenient to just bring your laptop to a session if you want to cook up, rather than you having to cook up at your house and then taking the beats over to the studio, let them listen to the beat, see if they like it. And then if you have to make a change, you have to take it back over to the house and then cook up again and then take it back over to the studio. And I think Drummer Boy was actually talking about that when he made Put On with Jeezy and Kanye. He said he had to go back and forth to the studio a few times to get the beat right, because back then you had to have all your stuff at the crib, and you had to make the beat, then present the beat, and then from there you had to kind of go back and forth to get the beat right. So it was a lot more cheaper, a lot more convenient to definitely do it inside of the box. So yeah, I can agree to that. So, and I can see why a lot of people right now would want to produce in the box, because it just simply, makes more sense, right? Now, why did it seem like hardware was obsolete? Well, of course, like I said before, the bulky setups, okay? You had to take a lot of stuff with you. Like back then, if I wanted to make a beat on the spot, I would have to take my MPC with me, and I had to take some type of controller with me that had sounds on it, and I would have to produce like that. So I have to load up all of this stuff, put it inside my bags, and then take it to the studio. When, could have just took a laptop and a MIDI controller, and that's pretty much about it. You'd have been ready to go. And then, of course, like I said before, the instant gratification of just making a beat, getting it sounding the way you want it to sound, and then go ahead and just exporting it, and you're pretty much done. So yeah, it seemed like for a little moment there, it's like, why should we even be making beats on this? You know what I'm saying? Why should we have abandoned the sound of this for the instant gratification and, getting stuff done? But yeah, it seemed like for a while there it was like, why should we even be on these right now? But we also got to remember this. Hardware has really never left at all. You know what I'm saying? You got to think about it. One thing that people always enjoyed about hardware was the hands-on feel of this. Okay? When you take your hands and you make stuff on this, it just has that feel, that tactile feel of like really producing. Like you really feel like you're a producer in a sense. And then the next thing about it was the limitations in it. Now, one thing I can say is inside the box, a lot of times I kind of get overwhelmed because there's so many sounds, so many plugins, so much stuff that you have to kind of go through that sometimes if you have an idea, you can kind of lose it. In my case, when I'm on here, if I find a particular sound, I go ahead and I just go to work because it does have its limitations when you are on here. And then it just seems so much more fluid when I'm making beats on hardware because of the limitations. It forces you to really be kind of creative when you're doing it. It just makes things so much better. Another thing that we want to talk about is standalone production. Okay? No computers involved. It's just this and this. Now, this is, I know some of y'all are going to say, hey, it's kind of like a computer and everything. I get it. But it still is a standalone situation. You don't have to turn on any computers, wait for any software, anything to kind of load up, even though sometimes these do take a little minute, but you have it and you own it. See, the thing about this is not a plugin. This is not being licensed to me. This is something that I actually own. This is real ownership. So regardless of what happens to any of my licenses or anything on my computer, I still own these pieces of gear and I will always be able to work on these pieces of gear at all time. So that's the cool thing about it. And then now, with reverb.com and everything, you can buy secondhand stuff, or if you want to get some new stuff from like, zounds.com, where, you want to click that link in the description and get some gear or whatever, you can go ahead and support me by clicking that link and getting some gear like this. So it doesn't matter if it's an MP or whatever, but Zounds has some really good deals where you guys can go ahead and get some equipment by clicking my link if you guys want to. But they have so much stuff to where you can get it new and used, whether it's from like a site like Reverb or new from like Zounds or whatever. You can get this stuff for fairly cheap right now and have that sound like I was referring to, because one thing about using hardware, the sound is incredible immediately. When you put it inside of the box, you have to kind of work to get to that particular sound. When you're working with these hardware units, it's like immediate. You have that immediate sound and it just sounds really good without you having to do so much to it. Now, you can get other pieces to enhance the sound, but like literally, like if you make a beat on here and then go ahead and run it through some cables and stuff and hit your preamps and stuff like that, the sound is amazing out of these units. So yeah, more and more people are like really jumping on this because they're trying to get their sound right. And then it just makes you feel like a real producer, at least to me. Like I just like, producing on stuff like this. I feel like, it's like a nostalgic feeling of, producing. And then to make things even better, now we have a hybrid workflow type of a situation. So even if we were kind of like computer people where we want to use VSTs and we want to still use our hardware, we could still use both of them and still get the same feel by working on the hardware, but still using it like in a software or a DAW type of a situation. There's multiple ways you can set this up. Of course, we all know the MPC 3.5 desktop beta just dropped. I made a beat on my live, which I'll try to pin in the comments or something somewhere, or you can just check out my last live or whatever, or my latest lives, depending on when you're watching this video. You'll be able to see how this thing works inside the DAW. And you can still use all of this inside of the DAW in a hybrid setup. And it just brings the best of both worlds in that hybrid setup. And I know a lot of you guys like the hybrid setup because Some days you might want to make a beat using all VSTs, but that particular lead or that particular bass just does not sound the way you need it to sound, and you might want to get it from a board and run it through some stuff and get it to sound the way you want to. And I know a lot of people who love running their stuff through pedals and certain things, and then running it back into the computer and using all of that to make a track, and stuff is coming out really good. So the hybrid setup thing with using this hardware and the software is definitely a plus in my opinion. So yeah, hardware seemed like it was going out, seemed like it was going to be obsolete for a while, but it never really went away. And then the more with the advancements with like the MPC, with even like Ableton, even like with the machine, and even like some other groove boxes and other units and the stuff that they're doing with a lot of these keyboards, I don't think it's going away no time soon, because I think with a lot of us who started off on hardware, I think that we're just kind of used to it. And I think that, you know, it just gives us, like I said before, that nostalgic feel of working and producing on it. And of course, the sound of it. The sound is incredible. Now, I know people talk about the MPCs and saying that they don't have that vintage sound like maybe the 60s and the 3000s and stuff like that. But still, these things still sound better when you route this stuff in. It just sounds bigger, it sounds wider, and it just gets that instant, really good sound, rather than like working in a box where you have to kind of get that sound where you need to be. This comes in sounding great as long as you kind of get your levels and everything right, and you pick the right sounds. This still really sounds good, and I think that's the biggest thing for me, is me knowing how to use it and me having that nostalgic feel and the sound. Nothing really beats hardware in my opinion. But you know, some people like it inside of the box. That's their thing. You know what I'm saying? I like it in this type of a way right here. But you guys let me know. Do you guys like the hardware way of doing it, all completely standalone? Do you guys like the hybrid setups? Do you like that? Or do you feel like in the box is the thing for you? So I want you guys to let me know in the comments right now. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up button for me. And I hope you guys learned something from this video. And like I always say, peace out.